Now, Dr. Beaker, said Professor Popkiss anxiously. Have you tidied up your laboratory? I want my old colleague Professor Zukov to see the Supercar workshop at its very best. Really, my dear fellow, retorted Dr. Beaker. Anyone would think I was absent-minded the way you keep reminding me about this wretched fellow's visit. Anyway, it isn't until tomorrow. I've got plenty of time to tidy up. Just now I've got an important experiment to do. Not now, Doc, broke in Mike Mercury, who had just walked in. Just do as the professor says. After all, it isn't every day we get such an important person as Zukov here to work for us. And he is coming all the way from Europe just to see Supercar. Yes, and he will help us develop her for important space explorations, added Professor Popkiss proudly. Ever since he had heard from his old university colleague, the professor had been buzzing around excitedly preparing for his visit, a little to Beaker's irritation. Doc hated anything to interrupt his routine. It would probably have developed into quite a heated Beaker and Popkiss feud if at that moment Jimmy had not come in with a cable in his hand. Say, Professor, there's a wire for you, said Jimmy. For me? Queried the professor, frowning. Perhaps Professor Zukov is unable to make the trip, muttered Beaker hopefully. Don't be silly, Beaker. He's already on his way, retorted Professor Popkiss heartedly. Now look, you two. Why not open it and find out? Suggested Mike in an exasperated voice. Go ahead, Mike, replied the professor. You read it. Despite his surroundings of the most up-to-date inventions and his many years in the United States, the professor still had an old-fashioned attitude to receiving a cable. He always presumed it brought bad news, and this time he was right. Come immediately to Leipzig, read Mike slowly. Sister Heidi gravely ill and repeatedly calling for you. Signed, Johann. Johann, echoed the professor. That is Heidi's son. What are you going to do, Professor? Asked Jimmy. There's only one thing to do, replied Mike. I'll fly you over right away in Supercar. No, Mike, replied the professor, recovering from the shock. No, you must prepare Supercar for Zukov's visit. He may arrive unexpectedly tonight. I will catch the next plane out. You can fly me to the airport in New York. Within half an hour, Supercar was refueled, and Mike and the professor were aboard. Don't worry, Popkiss, old fellow, assured Beaker, rather ashamed of his behaviour earlier. I'll see that everything is spick and span for Zukov's visit. Off you go, and good luck. Good luck, echoed Jimmy and Mitch as the professor and Mike took off through the roof doors. In no time, Jimmy and Beaker had tidied up the workshop, and even Mitch, sensing an emergency, refrained from getting into mischief. Mike returned from New York and reported having seen the professor safely to the airport. The next day, Mike and Dr. Beaker completed their rigid tests on Supercar and were only just through when Professor Zukov arrived. He's here! He's here! Cried Jimmy, joined by Mitch, who eked excitedly, not knowing quite why he was doing so. But from the start, Jimmy was disappointed in the professor. He had expected an old friend of Professor Popkiss to be quite different, and although they did not say as much, Mike and Dr. Beaker felt the same way. However, their loyalty to Popkiss was so great that they treated their guest with great courtesy and answered all his many questions on the workshop and Supercar. I am most upset to hear that Professor Popkiss has been called away, said Zukov when he heard about the cable, but strangely he never again referred to it, but seemed to only want to talk about Supercar and the workshop. Mike and Beaker dismissed it as the preoccupation of a man dedicated to his work, but secretly they were very disappointed. Mitch was the only one who did not try to conceal his dislike of the visitor, and, although usually friendly, he jumped nervously away whenever Zukov approached. Now, Mitch, go off and play, said Jimmy later that day. Dr. Beaker's showing Professor Zukov around, and you mustn't get in the way. Jimmy knew Mitch of old and feared that he would annoy the professor, who obviously did not like the monkey. Jimmy became too busy to notice that Mitch was quiet for a long time, which always meant trouble. Say, Jimmy, where's Mitch? Asked Mike much later, after the tour of inspection had ended. Haven't seen him around. I'll go look for him, replied Jimmy. Maybe he's sleeping. But Mitch was far from sleepy. Mitch! Exclaimed Jimmy crossly. Mitch, what are you doing? For there was Mitch in Professor Popkiss's room, squatting on the floor surrounded by books and papers which had obviously been pulled out from the chest of drawers. He was eking in great amusement at the picture he held in his hand. "Mitch, give that to me," demanded Jimmy firmly. Sheepishly, Mitch obeyed, and without a word climbed up on top of the window ledge and eked pathetically. But Jimmy's attention had been caught by the picture Mitch had handed to him. Leipzig University, it read, 1927. It was of a group of students, including Professor Popkiss, and under the photograph, the name of each student was printed boldly. But the name that stood out glaringly to Jimmy was Hans Zukov. "But it can't be," muttered Jimmy, staring at the picture with a puzzled frown. "But Jimmy," protested Mike later when the Supercar team were alone, "this was over 30 years ago. People change, you know." "Yes, that's right, Jimmy," added Dr. Beaker. "Why, in those days I had a wonderful head of hair." "Please look, Mike," pleaded Jimmy. "The Professor Zukov in the picture is very short, and is wearing glasses, and he's almost bald, too." "He's right," said Mike. "Zukov is the opposite to all these things. Even 30 years doesn't add height, and the fact that he's got thick hair and doesn't wear glasses makes me agree with you, Jimmy. It looks as if our visitor is an imposter." "But what about old Popkiss?" asked Beaker anxiously. "And the cable?" "That must have been a ruse to get him out of the way," replied Mike. "He was the only one who would have recognized our friend as a fake." "But what are we going to do, Mike?" asked Jimmy. "We must rescue Professor Popkiss. They must have him prisoner. First thing, Jimmy, is a job for you. You'll have to guard our prisoner. He's in his room right now. We'll lock him in and you and Mitch can keep guard. Doc and I have to get out and find Professor Popkiss." "But how, Mike?" queried Jimmy. "He's been gone a whole day." "Just a minute, Mike," broke in Beaker. "Someone's transmitting a message from the laboratory. Look, the signal light is flashing." Every room in the Supercar laboratory was watched by a television camera, and so the team proceeded to the clear view screen in the control room. They looked in turn at each room on their television set, and when they switched to Professor Zukov's room, they saw a very strange sight. Watched and heard by the Supercar team, Zukov was furtively transmitting his first day's report to his headquarters. "Agent 4X4 calling HQ station QNYC. All details of Supercar recorded together with blueprints of console and circuit systems. Will report back tomorrow with more information. Send cable from prisoner in Leipzig to allay suspicion. End of message." "A spy!" exclaimed Jimmy. "Did you trace the circuit, Doc?" asked Mike anxiously after they switched off the clear view. "Yes, Mike, I think I've got it," replied Beaker with a map spread in front of him. "The headquarters is located somewhere in this area of New York City." "That's where they've got Professor Popkiss prisoner, then," said Jimmy excitedly. "Could be, Jimmy," replied Mike thoughtfully. "But we've got to be sure or we could endanger his life. Now listen, we must change our plan. Whatever happens, Zukov must not suspect anything. We've got to leave him free to transmit his second message tomorrow. In fact, if he wants to leave, why, that's okay by us. Doc, this is what I want you to do." The next morning, according to plan, a cable signed by Professor Popkiss was received from Leipzig, saying that he would not be returning home for several days as his sister was gravely ill. As it happened, the imposter, posing as Zukov, was present when the cable was opened, and Mike, Beaker and Jimmy played their parts perfectly, reacting quite normally to the message. But the man was never for one moment out of their sight or hearing. They had to make sure his second and last message was monitored, or their chance of locating the whole gang and rescuing Professor Popkiss was lost. "What about the real Professor Zukov?" asked Jimmy when he and Mike were alone for a moment. "What's happened to him?" "They've probably got him prisoner, Jimmy," said Mike gravely. "There's a lot at stake. That's why we can't make a false move." "Quick, Mike, quick," whispered Beaker urgently. "Zukov is transmitting another message." On the pretext of resting in his room, Zukov had stealthily locked his door and on his own specially constructed suitcase-sized set was sending his promised report. But this time he ended the message by announcing that he was leaving Black Rock that night. His mission was accomplished. "Good," Mike muttered. "Couldn't be better. Okay now, Beaker, it's up to you to play it real natural. Do just as I said. Right, Mike, replied Beaker grimly. You can depend on me. Well, we sure are sorry to see you go, said Mike later when Zukov announced his intention of leaving. Can I take you anywhere in Supercar? No, protested Zukov stiffly. I have arranged to be picked up. I will try to see my old friend Popkiss when I have completed my lecture tour. Meanwhile, I have found my stay to be very informative, Mr. Mercury. I'm sure you have, replied Mike meaningly, and then recovering added, I think Dr. Beaker has a little something for you as a parting gift. Professor? Yes, continued Beaker hesitantly. Please accept this little fitted travel case as a token of our friendship. Professor Popkiss was to have presented it to you, but in his absence I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I do the honours. With a smile as if to say, you stupid fools, the man accepted the gift, gave a brief salute, and was gone. But Mike, burst out Jimmy, you've let him go. That's right, Jimmy, replied Mike. Now just sit tight and watch the next stage of the operation. Okay, Beaker, let's man the tracking station. Unwittingly, the imposter had played right into their hands. The so-called fitted travel case was in fact a special invention of Beaker's. It was a transmitter which would enable the team to track his every move, and moreover, to see and hear all that he said and did. With the aid of a hidden television camera, it would transmit pictures back to the Supercar workshop. He's boarding a private plane now at the airfield, reported Jimmy excitedly. Okay, Doc, instructed Mike. Keep track of the route. We mustn't lose him for a minute. Step by step, each stage of Zukov's journey and his whole conversation were followed by the trio. They're heading for New York, Mike, said Beaker, tracking their route on the video plan. Now this is the interesting part, replied Mike. Look, Mike, they've landed, said Jimmy, watching the Clearview screen intently. Yes, they're about 10 miles from the city, confirmed Beaker. Now, let's hope we don't lose them with any interference from New York. Okay, Doc, this is where I take off, said Mike urgently. Keep me posted in Supercar and I'll be right behind them. Jimmy assisted in the Supercar takeoff, and within minutes Mike was hot on the trail of the imposter. How are we doing, Doc? Asked Mike as he approached New York. They are driving about 6 miles northeast of where you are, Mike, replied Beaker. Just follow my instructions and you'll be there in about 60 seconds from now. I'll hook you up with the freeway Clearview channel so that you can see what's going on and pick your best landing spot. Just give them time to go into the building. They've stopped, Dr. Beaker. They're getting out of the car, cried Jimmy. All right, Jimmy. Keep calm, commanded Dr. Beaker. We must keep our wits about us. Meanwhile, the imposter was triumphantly announcing his arrival to his fellow agents at his HQ. Agent 4X4 reporting, sir. All has gone exactly according to plan. Do you have the information? Snapped the chief, a large, sinister-looking man with dual scars on his face. Everything, Chief, replied the man smugly. Right, bring in the prisoners, commanded the big man. A door opened, and there, gagged and bound, was the real Professor Zukov and Professor Popkiss. Hurry up, Mike, murmured Jimmy frantically beneath his breath. Coming into land on the roof of the building, came Mike's voice over the loudspeaker, as if in answer to Jimmy's plea. Look, Dr. Beaker, they've got guns with silencers and they're going to kill Professor Popkiss, cried Jimmy, unable to contain himself. Before I kill you, the chief went on, I want to prove to you that we are not the fools you take us for. Show them the plans and the circuits of the project Supercar number 4X4, he said to the imposter. So much for your clever Supercar team, went on the man. You are the fools, not us. But as foolish as you are, I do not intend to take any chances with you. Dead men tell no tales. Oh, Dr. Beaker, what's happened to Mike? Implored Jimmy. He'll be too late. Leave it to Mike, replied Dr. Beaker, sounding more confident than he felt. He can handle it. As you refuse to join us, I am afraid there is no alternative but to kill you, continued the chief agent, raising his revolver slowly. In the workshop, Jimmy covered his eyes in horror, and Beaker held his breath in anticipation. But suddenly, miraculously, the Clearview screen became a mass of shuffling figures, and shouts of rage and astonishment could be heard as Mike appeared through a trapdoor in the roof. He jumped down on top of the man, knocking the gun from his hand, and left him in a crumpled heap on the floor as he tackled the other two thugs in the room. "It's all right, Jimmy! It's all right!" shouted Dr. Beaker in relief. "Mike's rescued them!" Much later, when the agents had been handed over to the FBI and the Supercar plans recovered, Mike and the two professors returned to Black Rock. They received a warm and heartfelt welcome from Jimmy and Dr. Beaker, and also from Mitch, who took to the real Professor Zukov instantly, as did all the Supercar team. And a visit that started so unhappily did, finally, have a very happy ending.